this part of the stream is always the weirdest part because you're literally just waiting for something to happen on the YouTube here. So hopefully it'll come live in just a second. Okay, I think that is running. That's good. Good morning, everyone. I hope everyone's well. So I want to do a live stream today because I want to do a bit more live coding. I was asked to do a challenge last week, so I thought I would use this as that. Also, I want to answer some questions, but also it's because I don't actually have anything scheduled for going out today. So hence the live stream. Let's go and answer some questions. There's quite a few questions that I would like to answer. Let's just take a look at the browser here. Bear with me just a second before I get all of my windows aligned. Okay, so there's a couple of questions that I want to answer. The first one was asked yesterday by a fellow called Ralph B. Where is your video on why one should use a framework? So this is in reflection to the 5 reasons why you shouldn't use a framework in 2017. There's that video I did quite some time ago, and I did say that I would do a video on why you should use a framework to contradict, or not to contradict, to sort of answer the other side of that. Well, actually, it's coming up very soon. I'm actually going to be doing a talk at PHP Southwest next week. Not next week, sorry, next month. Blimey, if it was next week, that would be crazy. Next month on this topic, on why you should and shouldn't use a framework. Not just in PHP, but in other languages as well. Now, usually what happens is that those talks are recorded and they're put on to their own YouTube channels. So there will be a video on that where I'm talking about it. Now, the last talk that I did in front of a crowd, that was, I kind of used this How to Code Well channel as a means of sort of practicing. So I might do a practice video like I did with the previous one, which was around Docker and data image sizes. So I'll probably do something like that before. The issue though is, as I've mentioned in my update 1.0 video, April I want to class as freelance month, because there's a lot of content that I want to push out in April regarding freelance and how to gain clients as a freelancer. So it might sort of go in between that. It might come after the actual talk. I don't know. I haven't really decided yet. But in April, what we're doing is, not only are we doing a Tuesday's tutorial like we do every Tuesday, but we're also going to be doing a Thursday show and a Friday show on freelance. So this is me talking about freelance and in particular how to gain clients and so forth. So if you haven't done so already, do subscribe to check that, to get hold of that. So there's going to be an additional 8 extra videos in April, which I am almost ready for. So yes, that's kind of a very convoluted answer to Ralph B's question. Where is your video on why one should use a framework? The reason why I haven't done it is because I've been so busy with other bits and pieces. But it is coming through. But it might not be in the format of a normal video. It might just be a practice video based on the talk that I'm doing at PHP Southwest next month. Okay, so we're going to scroll down here. Barry Richards, I will get back to you as soon as I can. This is talking about Jekyll stuff. I am a little bit crunched for time today because I've got bits and pieces that I need to crack on with. So I won't answer all of these. But if we scroll down, there's another one that I just want to talk about. This was this fella here, Best Hat. So this was based on last week's live stream where I did a block email addresses. So he said, hello, please can you do a tutorial about how to block or limit forgotten password requests by IP, for example. And IP only has 7 request attempts. Okay, if that's possible. That is what I want to focus today's live coding challenge on. And I was thinking about this the other night, how best to approach this. So we're gonna try and attempt to do something around this topic today. So, okay, let me just double check a couple of things, and then let's just get rid of that. Um, let's just double check. Sorry for my windows are all over the place. You're gonna have to bear with me, Mo. We're in this tutorial. We're in PHP Storm as usual. What I've got is a simple login.php file. Before I jump into this, I just want to talk about IP addresses, and I want to talk about why, what kind of considerations you have to have when you're blocking someone, whether it be an IP address or what have you. There is a kind of a lot of questions that you have to ask yourself. Really, it kind of boils down to storage. Where are you going to store this information, and what is it that you want to store? Because the thing is, if you're blocking someone by IP address, you're going to have a huge amount of IP addresses to record, and then you're going to have to search through those IP addresses to ensure that that user isn't already blacklisted, right? So let me just go back to here for a second, and let's just talk about it before I actually jump in and dive in and do some code. So with the IP addresses, you want to ensure that the way in which you store these IP addresses is not going to be detrimental to your system. So yes, storing 5 or 10 IP addresses, that's fine. You can search through that, that's fine. But when you're talking about something that is, 10,000 IP addresses, 100,000 IP addresses, because over time you've stored this information up, it does become a bit of a challenge. And you also need to think about where in the system that is being stored. If you think about the feature here, you're blocking someone's IP address because they've made a request too many times. That feature should be encapsulated in itself, right? I don't think that should be stored against or close to other bits of data around the system. That, in my opinion, is, and this is a question that you have to ask yourself, is this classed as disposable data? Are you going to care about this data in 6 months' time, in a year's time? Are you going to care about how many people you've blocked over this period of time? If, for instance, you only have like 7 requests to make in a period of, say, 24 hours, then after 24 hours, what are you going to do with that data that no longer is relevant? It could be that there is just someone who is trying to forget their password in a quite rightly so manner. Maybe they just have some human error when they're filling out the form or what have you. So you don't want to forcibly prevent people from getting into your system. But at the same time, you want to ensure that what you're recording isn't just going to suddenly bloat the system. The amount of times that I've gone into systems and I've had a look at log files that are years old, and I'm like, you do realize your log files are now in the gigabytes. Do you need this information? Do you need this data? Is it relevant to you? Now, some people will say yes, it will. I'm aware that there are people who would see this as useful information, because then they can, people who like graphs and charts and plot things and want to know, what's actually happening to the system. But you have to sort of ask the person who wants this feature, how much of this data do you want to store, and also where do you want to store it? Now, if they want to store it in a database, then I would certainly see this feature as more of a microservice than an actual something that is latched on to the system. So, for example, if you're an e-commerce shopping cart, e-commerce site, I wouldn't have this data stored next to the product storage, right? This could be in its own microservice. This could be in its own data store. This means now, when you're talking about microservices, this means that no longer are you coupled to the data storage engine of everything else. So this could be Mongo, this could be DynamoDB, this could be I don't know, think of another one, SQLite. It doesn't have to be the storage engine of everything else. This should be just, in my opinion, a request to say this IP address is making this request. How many requests has it made in this allotted time? And then the response is you have 7, or you have like 6 or 5 or 4 requests available, that kind of thing. And that should in my opinion, be as simple as it should be. Now, let's now talk about another controversial subject about this whole blocking of the IP thing. And this is something that I was kind of debating in my head. IP addresses are fine, but IP addresses are I guess again it goes back to why it is you're trying to do this, because with an IP address, of course, it is the IP address of the server. Now, if you are, if you have I don't know, something that, just think of the words. So lots of people can have the same IP address, right? Because if they're going through the same router, right, if they're going through the same server, then they'll have their own, a similar public IP. So you want to be careful that you're not actually preventing a whole building full of people from accessing your system just because someone in one department has failed to attempt to log in more than 7 times. Doesn't mean someone in the other department upstairs needs to have the same issue. So you got to be careful, right? Obviously, if you're doing an internal system, then that's fine because it's an internal IP. But if this is publicly on the net, then it's you have other considerations to make, right? And also with the forgotten password, it's usually tied to an email address. So it's how many times does that IP and maybe that email address have made that request. That kind of thing. Anyway, let's now get into the code rather than listen to me babble. Bear with me just a mo. Make sure that I've got everything sorted and set up. I literally just came into this office and went, I need to do a live stream today. So I don't really have much organized. Bear with me just a second. All right, let's go back into the tutorial. Basically, here I've got this login.php file. I'm just going to create a new one, and I'm going to call this something like, I don't know, forgotten, or forgotten password. Forgotten password. It's a bit long. .php. So basically, here you can imagine. Let's just remove all that. Here you can imagine that you have like a login form, and then you have a button that goes to the forgotten password, and then it's that forgotten password file that then does the checking, make sure that the IP address or whatever doesn't have the request. So I'm not going to build a login form today, but what I will do is just let's just break this off, and I will just have a link, right? So ahref, and we're just going to go to forgotten password, and we're just going to call this forgotten password, right? So, you've seen this before. It's a link that just goes to a page of forgotten password. So all right, let's put in an input. Let's just make it a little bit more fancy, shall we? So an input of, otherwise this is, you got to add some context to this, I suppose. Oops. So type is text, maybe, I don't know, and then give it a name of login, of username, and then we'll just grab that, have a password, whatever, right? So it's just two inputs. We'll give it some labels as well, just to give, this is just window dressing, right? So username, and password, like so. But really, and you would obviously have a button and so forth, so I'll just add that in as well. So this is just a submit with the value of login, right? Whatever. And then you have this. Then you have this link down here. This is really what we're focusing on today, the forgotten password bit. So let's just save that. And I'm just going to double check a couple of bits and pieces. Does that go to there? Yeah, it does. Awesome. So I'm just going to put in some more window dressing up here in this one. So let's just close off PHP for now. Let's just do a H1 and just do for, oh dear, forgotten password, like so. And obviously I need to spell this correctly. Oops. Ugh, fat finger syndrome today. Right. So now if we go into the browser, so if we go into here and refresh this, we should have the username, password, and forgotten password. It's not formatted at all, really. But if you click on forgotten password, you just go to forgotten password, right? So here you can imagine that there's an email address, like an input form, and then a submit. So that's all hunky dory. I'm just going to tidy this up a little bit more because it is starting to annoy me now. So let's just do a BR for that, and let's just put these all on blank lines. Keep it nice and clean. We're going to have a heading up here. We're just going to call this login. Save that. Go back to the browser. Let's see how badly it looks now. Okay, it's whatever. It's it's a form with a link. All right, you click the link, you go to there. Wow. Okay, so it's at this point you need to make a decision now. Do you have a input here with an email address, and then when you click on that, is that going to do the check, or are you going to do the check as soon as you get to this page? Now, again, this really depends on your use case. So let's just add a form into the forgotten password to give it a little bit more oomph. So this is email address, because this is obviously, you don't have to use an email address, but this could be the way in which you check. So email address, the way in which you check that the way in which you check that the user actually has an email, and then that's going to send like a forgotten password link to that email address. So this would be called send link or something. So we're saving that. Let's just dive back into here. I do apologize. I haven't actually, that's what I was doing. I didn't actually show you that, but that's what I was doing. So the question is, do you do a check when you hit the send link, or do you do a check when you actually get to this page? If you do a check when you get to this page, then perhaps you also should do a check when you send the link. It's completely up to you. So let's just go back into the code. Now, with the forgotten bits and pieces, here is where you would write the code to listen for the submit, or to listen for or to check the IP addresses. Let's just talk about how we can actually get the IP address of someone, and we do this using different variables. Hold on. Well, something's gone a bit weird. So yeah, you would do like server variables, for instance, to get the IP addresses of bits and pieces. So the server variable is like a main variable. So let's just do a print r. I'll show you what that is. So print r, we're going to just do a pre, and we're just going to do we'll kill that out, and we'll do a print r. And I'll just show you what this is. So you do $, then underscore, and then you can see, I don't know if you can see off the IDE here, whether it's showing you in the stream, but you've got underscore post request server session get cookie env files and so forth. The one we're looking for is server. So let's just save that, refresh the browser, and I'll show you the difference that makes. If I can find the damn file. Here we go. So yeah, let's click onto that. So there's a whole lot of stuff, right? A whole lot of stuff that you've got from the server variable, including all the document routes. I have talked about this, I believe, in one of my tutorials. But the real daddy of the one that we're looking for is the remote address, which is this one up here, which at the moment is set to localhost, obviously, and the remote port. Let's scroll down. We've also got other bits and pieces in here, like the HTTP host, so that's localhost. You got the cookies, the connections, all kind of stuff, even the times in which things were actually requested, and obviously the file name. So that's my file name straight to this file. So this will be changed, obviously, when you have when you go to another file. So if we go to the login, for instance, this will be different. But really, let me just check the thing that the IP address that you're wanting to check is the where is it? Where did it go? Where did it go? It's the server address. Where did that fall? So you got the remote address, and then down here you've got the ports and bits and pieces. So yeah. It's a bit different because I am running off of localhost. But the thing is, now I'm thinking about this, about IP addresses. I'm not too sure, based on what I was saying beforehand about locking people out with IP addresses. It might be a bit of a challenge because of, like I said, you might be blocking out a lot of people because of the IP address. The IP address isn't specifically to a single machine in a building. So yeah, you gotta think about the use case, and I can't justify a need of doing that right now. What I would do instead of using an IP, I would use, perhaps, if I wasn't going to store the user request in a database because of the storage concerns that I mentioned earlier, I would probably do it through the session, the user's session, rather than the IP. So so you could do it through here. There's bits and pieces that you can use here, like the host names and everything that you can do, but you just gotta be careful. You don't want to be blocking people that are also in the building. So let's come back out of this and go straight back into the code. I think what I'm going to do, instead of using the IP, and I know that it was all specifically on the IP, I think what I'm going to do instead is base it on the user's session. This means that I don't have to store it in a database, which is handy as well. And because it's a user session, it's specifically to that one user. So what I'm going to do with the server here, you can also do a session like so. So I'm going to just print that out, and I'm going to show you what that does. So let's go back into the browser, if I can find the bits and pieces, and refresh that. Oops, sorry. Whoa. I haven't started the session, have I? That's why. So what we need to do, I should have mentioned that beforehand. When using sessions, we need to start the session first to ensure that the session is actually running. So you do that using the session _start, like so. So let's save that and see what's going on. Let's go back into the browser. There's so many windows. I did say in like a previous Coffee and Code stream that I would have a second screen specifically for the actual control of the live stream, but I haven't actually done that yet. Here we've got a single array. Okay, it's a single array because this session is empty. But we can fill this up. We can fill this up with whatever we want. We can even serialize objects and put them in there if we wanted to. I don't recommend it, but you can see this as like a container, a bucket of stuff that goes along with the user in the user session. Now, there is obviously things that you have to be concerned with this, because sessions aren't always persisted, in the sense that they do have a lifetime, they have a lifespan, and so forth. But you would hope that if someone is doing 7 password requests in, say, under an hour or under 30 minutes, then your session would be alive for that period of time. So what I'm going to do is just go back into the tutorial here, and we're going to just start filling this session up. So on the hitting of this page, we can do sort of session, and we're just going to make it as an array. The array here is going to have an index. We're going to call this I don't know, forgotten password, like so. That can itself be an array, right? So it can be like a nested multi-dimensional array. Whoops, let's just move that out. So here we could have something like attempts. Yeah, so that could be the count of attempts. And then we could have a last, sort of like last checked or something, that's or date, right? So that is the date in which the last attempt was. So this is going to be a counter of attempts. We're going to set that to be 0, for instance, and the date is just a date. And this, we're going to set this to just be a date, like so. So we're going to have a date variable like this, and we're just going to do a new, and we're going to call this, just do a simple, just a new date time, and that's just going to go into there. That needs to be like so. All of these things, we're going to close that up. Now, what we can also do is, instead of passing in just the full object, we can do a format. So we can just get the format the string, perhaps, whatever, whatever. Let's just remove that for now. We're not going to worry about that too much. Let's just save that. I'm going to remove the date time as well. But you want to ensure that you're checking on the dates. Let's just save this. Go back into the browser. Refresh the page. Okay, so now we have something in our session. We have forgotten password and the number of attempts. So every time we refresh this page, the attempt number would go up, right? So we could, for instance, go back into the tutorial, and let's make a nice little counter file. Where are we here? Okay, so let's just bring that back out. Whoa, that was the wrong button. I don't want to bring this too far out. There we go. Excellent. Okay, so that attempts is going to be a counter. Now you could do a counter, like you could just go session, then forgotten password, then attempts, and then plus, because that's just going to increment the thing. Or you could pull this out. We're going to pull this out anyway, because we need to ensure that we need to do some checking on this. So let's just do a variable. We're going to call this attempts. Whoops. And we're just going to set this to be session, and then we're going to do forgotten password, and then that is going to be the number of attempts, like so, right? So that's now going to be set to whatever that value is. Obviously, we need to ensure that we have this. So if session and then sort of forgotten password, this probably needs to be in a check to actually make sure that the variable is live. So we do an is set to ensure that it is actually set, right? Like so. And then we can do attempts like that. what we're going to do is have a ternary operator. I like my ternary operators. I'm starting to get used to them now. So we're going to check if that is set. If that is set, we're going to get it. And then if not, we can set it to 0. But in fact, as I'm thinking about doing this, that's probably not the best way to do that. Sorry, that was a reminder on my machine. Don't need that. So instead, what we're going to do, let me think, is set that like that. So that's setting to the attempts. Attempts is going to just be setting that to 0 because that's the first attempt. Even though we've set it here, we're just going to leave that. In fact, what I might do is if is set, then we do this. Then if is set, sorry, then forgotten password. Then we do attempts like so. Then we have the attempts in here. Else, we're going to set attempts to be 0, to be attempts, or to 0. Yeah. Let's just remove that. So basically, we're checking that there is a session. Then we're checking that there is attempts, and then we're setting the variable of attempts to that. If there isn't any attempts, then we set attempts to that. In fact, I've gone and spelt this wrong. Oops. Let's just do counter instead, because that makes attempts. What does that mean? You know, that's it's not. It's actually a counter, isn't it? It's not actually yes, there is the number of attempts, but that could mean quite a lot of different things as well. You know, could that be the attempt of the request? Could that be the attempt of that particular username? You know, so the counter is the amount of times that this has happened. You know that a counter is going to start from 0, and so forth. So we have now a variable called counter. We can just set that to be counter itself, because that is always going to be set to 0 by default. So we have a counter. This counter will be whatever that is. We also need to increment the amount of requests too. So what you could do here is that if that was, say, 1, that would be 1, right? So then you would do something like this. You would do session is equal to, and then you would do counter plus 1, right? Because then you're plussing that up. Or you could just plus it, right? Because what that's doing is it's just incrementing that counter. So you could do that. So what we're doing is you're saying that counter, we plus that up, right? And then we add that, and then so forth and so forth. So let's save this. Let's just see what's going on here. That's setting it to 0, so we don't want to do that. Let's just remove this, so it's just going to be an empty thing, because it should be set in this attempt. So the first one is going to be 0, and then that is going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, and so forth. And then this is just going to print that out. So let's just save this, go back into the browser here, and start refreshing and seeing what happens. So the counter here is set to 1. That's fine. Let's go back into the code. So if we have that, that's fine, blah, blah, blah. Then if we have this, so let's just set that to be, let's just test that out and just go 1. And let's refresh. Bear with me just a minute. I've just got something to... Hold on. Some hearing noises. Right. What was I doing? Set counter is blah, 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 blah. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. I'm gonna have to make this very, very short. Let's just remove that code for now. Basically, I know that this isn't great, but I've just had a message that I need to shoot off. So I'll probably get back to this later. But essentially, what you need to do is have an incremental way of saving your amount of requests to that, and then you do a check. So I'll probably get back to this later on, but I have to dive off because I am being chased downstairs. So I will speak to you all soon. Cheers.